right, Brooke, thank you for calling into the show today. Grateful to have you back on the podcast for, I think, a third time.
Love it. Thank you for having me today, Ryan. I'm really excited to join you.
I always enjoy our conversation, and I know you've got a lot going on with transactions recently. You're very, busy in the real estate market, and obviously spring/summer has been very active for you. So I want to talk a little bit about that today.
Awesome.
Now, I know the market trends you've seen recently. We talk, of course, all the time about Rhode Island being a hot market. A lot of people wanting to move within the state, transition from renting to owning. But I've noticed a lot of your clientele seems to be coming from out of state. So I want to talk a little bit about that to see what your thoughts are on that trend. Is that something you've seen pick up more recently? And what are some of the reasons people are coming to Rhode Island?
Absolutely. So just speaking a little bit to that, this has actually been a continuing trend. Over the last 5 years or so, we've seen a large influx of folks relocating to Rhode Island from out of state, and that trend just continues into the now. As it stands, as of 2024, we were the number 7 inbound state in the U.S. So that is very much impacting our market here. The Rhode Island real estate market has remained extremely robust. Price appreciation last year, we saw about 7 to 10% on average, which is just incredible. That's nearly double the national average. So while you're hearing a lot of other states, where homes are getting stale or taking huge price reductions, or even in some areas of the country, like Florida, for example, it's becoming kind of hard to actually sell houses. That's simply not the case in Rhode Island. Market's very strong. And, there's a lot of internal demand for people just relocating from within the state. So selling to upsize or selling to downsize, even second homes, really, because Rhode Island also is a seasonal market, Narragansett, Newport, things of that nature. A lot of second homes down in that area, and even investment properties, right, for short-term rentals and things of the like. But really, I think what is driving our market even more so, just based on the data, is relocation and relocation from out of state. So I know alone last year, 60% of my business were clients relocating to the area. And that's obviously very substantial. I know in talking with a lot of other realtors in the area that their businesses are also being heavily impacted by relocation to Rhode Island. So definitely something that we're seeing here, and that is driving our local market.
And that's a trend I've seen, with you, obviously, in your business. And a lot of the conversations we're having are about people moving into the state. And being a local myself now, I'm still working up the ability to call myself a local, but an aspiring local. I think one of the interesting things about Rhode Island, and I'm curious your thoughts if this is influencing some of that interstate migration too, but Rhode Island, because it's so small, you have, as a person of Rhode Island, as someone who lives in Rhode Island, you have the ability to change your geographic scenery very quickly. For example, right. East side and west side of Rhode Island really aren't that far from each other. Same with East Providence and Barrington. They're really not that far from each other, maybe 20-minute drive. That 20-minute drive completely changes the entire scenery, demographic of the town, amenities. Whereas in a place like Massachusetts, because it's so much bigger, you have to move so much farther. So I think that's, for me, I feel like that'd be one reason I can understand a lot of people are moving within the state, but from out of state, I feel like that would be attractive too, because you're on a map, your target you're putting down for the location you want to be, even if it's the state of Rhode Island as a whole, is pretty small. So within that small market, you have so many different choices of towns. I know for you, that's one thing you talk about with your clients often is what type of community are you looking for? What type of amenities are you looking for in school systems? So at least in general, is that a priority for you? So I feel like from that standpoint, I would imagine those conversations you're having with relocation buyers, they appreciate the diversity that is within that small radius.
You hit the nail on the head. And to your question earlier of, what is drawing people to Rhode Island and what do I find that my relocation clients have to say about Rhode Island? Number one is that diversity of landscape within such a small land area. So perhaps you're someone that does want to be on a good swath of land and a little bit more removed. We're going to put removed in quotes, so air quotes here, because there's nothing really removed in Rhode Island, like we just said, because it's such a small land area. So if you buy in the western half of the state, you have that rural-esque vibe going on, but you're still 25 minutes to downtown Providence, which is the capital here. And that's become another big drawing point for people. The food scene in Providence is absolutely fantastic. I've heard a lot of people say that it rivals Boston or is even superior to Boston. Great cultural scene in Providence, art scene, schools, RISD's there, Brown's there, Providence College, and the list goes on. So those are very appealing aspects. The other thing that I'm finding that people love about Rhode Island is the ease of getting to Boston or New York if you work in either of those big cities. So you're not paying those price tags, but you're still able to easily access Boston within about an hour or so, and then New York within about 3 hours. I actually do have clients that go into work in New York a couple times a month because they're not having to go in every single day. So it's actually feasible and practical for them. And that brings me to the next point of like one of the biggest factors is simply affordability. We're much more affordable than nearby Massachusetts and even some parts of Connecticut, which has been a large point for a lot of folks relocating to the area. That's not to say that people that live here aren't feeling the prices, because the market has increased so much that if you speak to someone that's local to the area, the impact on pricing is really substantial in contrast to the median income. But for folks coming from like California and states like that, which there's quite a few, it feels really affordable, if not even cheap. And I don't have a better word for that. A lot of times they're just shell shocked by what they can purchase, you know, because they're paying $5,000 a month in rent and they can get a beautiful home for $5,000 a month. Really even like, you know, starting at $3,500, $4,000, somewhere in that wheelhouse. So that's been a big drawing point, certainly. And then last thing I always have to hark on is just the coastal vibe. In Rhode Island, everybody comes here and they're just like oohing and ahhing over how beautiful it is. You are, you know, basically surrounded by water or able to access water from any given spot within about a half hour, which is really nice. So even if you don't live by the water, you can get to a beach easily. And that for a lot of people has definitely been a selling point. So lots going on here, lots of good things. And the last thing that just came to mind, because I know it's one of my favorite parts of Rhode Island, and it's something that a lot of my relo clients say, Brooke, I love that. We actually have a lot of cute small towns that are like old school, like Main Street Americana, that have little downtown centers that you can walk to from different neighborhoods. So coffee shops, cafes, you know, restaurants, shops, and the like, all within a little downtown area. And it harkens back to like, you know, an older time, I guess you would say. And people like that. It's a very nostalgic New England sort of feel. And I've noticed that a lot of people have remarked on that after they visit here, or it being one of the driving reasons for them to move here.
Yeah, now that you mention that and hearing you say it, there's definitely a lot of those little gems. And I know, you know, that's obviously your specialty, is you're an expert on the area, and you find all the gems, whether it's, you know, communities or restaurants to explore, and that helps value, you know, for your clients. I think
Absolutely.
That's not always common, that people who say they're an expert in the market really are. And I know from experience, that's certainly something, you know, you talk about and back up with, you know, your knowledge. And something
I appreciate that.
Of course, something I enjoy, you know, exploring in Rhode Island as well, is finding those little hidden gems, because there's so many. So one other question I wanted to talk to you about is relevant to this whole topic from a practical standpoint. I know a lot of your clients who relocate to Rhode Island actually have homes to sell in different states. And I'm sure a lot of people have questions about how do you navigate that process? I mean, if you're listening to this now from out of state and you're like, that all sounds great, but I have to sell a house in a different state. How am I ever going to be able to do both transactions at the same time, especially if you need the funds from the sale of your house? And I know you and I work together on a lot of those situations, but from your standpoint, I mean, what are some of the common concerns, and how do you help someone navigate that process?
Absolutely. So it's definitely nuanced. And I always say to my clients that are looking to relocate, the earlier you begin to plan, the better off you will be always, because that really allows us to evaluate all of your options. I'm not going to get into all the options here because that's part of my expertise, but there's ways that we can manage the move on the back end and different routes that you can pursue, really upwards of like 4 to 5 options, and whatever makes most sense for you and your family in terms of lining up a sale and a purchase at the same time. Some people need to sell their home back in their, home state in order to purchase here, while others don't need that contingency but are hopeful to align the sales pretty much because they don't want to be paying 2 mortgages. And there's a multitude of different ways we can play that. And part of my process is meeting with my clients via Zoom or in person if they come to visit in the area, and walking them through all of those different options. Another thing that is absolutely key is that they have a great listing agent if they do need to sell their house in order to move here to Rhode Island. And part of what I offer is connecting them with a trusted agent in their respective state that I'm going to be coordinating with, because there's a lot of moving parts when we're trying to put together, a sale and a purchase at the same time. And we want to make sure that we have a collaborative team that has the skill set to get it done. It's not an easy thing to do. And making sure that the other agent is experienced and has that know-how is really, really imperative. And I myself have helped many, many, many clients relocate over the years. And it's just become, second nature to me to understand the operational end of it. And I have the finesse in order to get it done. And that's really important, because if you're not skilled in that process, it really can be a to-do.
Absolutely. I think you need to have that resource in your corner because there's a lot of things you don't know. And I think what you mentioned is really important, like the cross collaboration of agents. I've been involved on relocations from the lender side, and I can see a lot of the challenges that happen when you have 2 agents in different states that don't communicate together on the same purchase. I had one transaction actually that was 5 contingencies in a row. It was a snowball. Wow. So my client was the last in the ladder. They were buying a house that their seller was accepted an offer from a buyer who was contingent upon sale, whose house was contingent upon sale, contingent. It was 5 in a row. Oh. And it's like, if something like that happens, which obviously is a crazy example, but you need to have communication. I know one thing you do is you offer, again, that realtor connection to make sure that team's complete, and you vet out the agents to make sure that you have qualified people to align the transaction. That's awesome.
That's correct. Yeah. That's a crazy one though, Ryan. I've never come across that just yet.
Yeah, it's not something we are aware of as the lender until, the end and challenges start happening. But, closing date gets extended on one loan, we all move. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic to keep an eye out for. So obviously it's super important to have a trusted team in any transaction, but especially in a relocation, you want to make sure you have a rock star real estate agent like yourself. Thank you as always.
And I can't attest enough. Oh, I was just going to say, last thing, Ryan, you're a rock star lender, and that is also an integral piece of the process too, is aligning with folks that, beyond just an agent, your lender is going to be also one of the pieces of the puzzle in terms of making sure that you have all those options laid out in front of you. So I know we've had the pleasure of working together on many transactions, and you're definitely one of the best, if not the best in the business. And that is also very much a key in terms of getting it done.
Well, I appreciate that, and especially the retraction on the one of the best comments. I think that was the best thing you said all day. No, just kidding. All jokes aside, I always appreciate our partnership and how hard you work for your clients. So hopefully if you're listening to this and you want to talk about relocation next steps, I'll leave all of Brooke's comments in the show notes. So feel free to contact her to navigate your next move. And as always, Brooke, thank you for coming on today, and hopefully we'll see you on again soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Ryan. Have a great day.
You as well.